I'd say a real kind of aha moment for people who have children when we're talking about their relationship is to say, if your child ended up in a relationship like the one you're in now, is that okay by you?
Hello, my friends, and welcome back to the Redefining Midlife podcast. I'm your host, Jo Clark, and thank you so much for joining me today. Now, a few months ago on episode 168, I had a conversation with psychotherapist Nikki Grenell about what to do if your relationship with your partner was needing some help. Now, we talked about connection, we talked about intimacy, and how you can find your way back to each other when you're in a long-term relationship. And that episode was really about the possibility of repair, and it really clearly touched a nerve because so many of you reached out after it aired. But the messages I also received told me something else. A lot of women listening weren't asking how to stay. They were quietly asking themselves something harder. How do I know if I should leave? And if I do, where on earth do I begin? So today's conversation is like a companion to that one. Same theme, but with a different lens. My guest today is a psychologist and life coach, Lana Hall. Now, Lana has worked as a psychologist for 16 years and as a life coach for the past 3. She coaches women to identify and release the patterns and blocks that have been quietly undermining their relationship success, not just in the relationship they're in now, but also across the board. And Lana's personal story is one that she brings into her work with real honesty. Lana's been married, raised children, and navigated a midlife divorce that she describes not as a failure, but as the decision that allowed her to build a deeper relationship with herself, become a better role model for her kids, and eventually step into a more satisfying connection with her new partner. Lana's also the author of 2 psychology books and is currently working on a novel, which I love to hear. Now, this is going to be a deeply honest conversation about clarity, courage, and what it actually looks like to put yourself first in a relationship decision that affects everything. So whether you're quietly questioning, whether you're actively weighing things up, or if you're somewhere in the middle, or if you know somebody who is, I think there's something here for you. So after all of that, welcome to the podcast, Lana. I'm so glad that you're here today.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you for having me.
And before we get into the big questions, I'd love our listeners to get a sense of who you are. Now, you've had quite a layered journey from psychology into coaching, and you've got your own experience of midlife divorce thrown into it all. So can you give us a bit of a story about how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, sure. All right. I think ever since I was young, and probably one of the most defining things about me is always interested in health and wellness. So physical health as well as mental health. And I had that, ever since I was like a kid and a teenager. Spent plenty of years as a teenager being crazy until I got to 24, which is, when our brain is basically fully developed, and thought, okay, I'm ready to kind of settle down and do something with my life. Always like the idea of helping people or helping the environment was another thing I was really interested in. But I settled on psychology and loved it, worked really well for me. So I went through that whole process. Takes 6 years at least to become a psychologist. And then by that point, I had met my husband and I went and had kids, had 2 kids, and then, yeah, I've mostly run my own businesses, had a solo private practice, then a group private practice. And so I was following this 24 to whenever 2023 was, in terms of how old I was, 39, quite a
Yep.
traditional trajectory, or so I thought. And then everything sort of shifted around 2023. So I had wound up the group private practice, didn't really recognize it at the time, but definitely was actually getting burnt out. I was wearing way too many hats, the owner, the manager, still working in the business as well. And my husband at the time and I went overseas, and that was quite stressful. So I was like doing a bit of psychology. The relationship is also falling apart. And I went and actually started doing training and coaching, working for someone else, separated towards the end of 2024. And then there's sort of been all the rollout and fallout of that to now where we are separated and I'm working as a relationship coach primarily. Yeah. So a big shift in the last few years, bang on that 40.
Yeah. Yeah, bang on 40. Is that when it all started to unravel and then you're just repackaging up to something completely different now, which is
Yeah.
great. Yeah, so you
Yes.
come with all of this from a professional basis, looking through the
Mm.
lens of psychology and coaching, but also a lived experience, which is also something would be helpful, I imagine, when you come in, we've got clients coming to you, you can
Yes.
really empathize with what they're going through because you've lived it.
Yeah, yeah, 100%. And, like that was quite motivating for me. A lot of people, when they're doing coaching, are picking something that they're very passionate about, that they often have personal experience with, and they know
Mm.
what works for them. But then, yes, I'm also layering on, I've done the Gottman relationship training from a psychological perspective. So things like, what are those communication skills that you need, as well as that coaching focus on like, all right, well, what's our goal and how are we going to get you there? How do we take out that stuff that's holding you back?
Gotcha. So you've also described your divorce as something that allowed you to go deeper with yourself, not something that happened to you, but something that shaped you. And that's a perspective that a lot of women do struggle to reach, especially early on when there's lots of things going on. Was that a reframe that came with time, or did some part of you know that deep down, even when you were in the thick of it all?
Ugh. I don't know that it ever felt like it was happening to me. But that's coming from a very particular perspective from a long time, in terms of coaching and psychology, like in terms of responsibility for ourselves and what we want to create in our lives. I guess probably the lead up to when it got really bad, I felt like things were just happening to me. Like I'm getting responses that I don't like, communication's not working. And what do I do about that? Well, I did all my nice psychology techniques. It didn't work.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I do think there was definitely a point where, and this is, yeah, it was a very intuitive moment where we'd had a really big fight and I was out for a walk by myself and I just had this sense that a line had been crossed and it was I didn't know it had happened until it had happened, but there was just this sense of like, oh, this is too far. I can't put up with this in my life any longer. And so I thought, okay, well, that's interesting. What do you want to do about that?
Mm.
And that I think was a real turning point in terms of like, I actually have to get out of this situation. So it was something that just kind of came a bit out of the blue, I suppose, but very much an inner knowing. But I've heard this from like clients since, right? It's the same kind of thing that you're aware but not really aware. And when you said about your listeners and it might be, yes, you listen to something and there's a part of you where it's like, oh, that really resonates. That brings something to my conscious mind. Then we tend to
Yeah.
just kind of shove it back down because it's like, oh, that's too hard or I don't want to deal with that. But then people will just have this moment where it's like something just clicks and it shifts inside them and they just step over a threshold and then they're like, all right, I'm ready. I'm not ready. Like I don't actually know anything about
Yes. Yeah.
what
No,
you're
I'm
anything
ready,
at
but I'm
that
not ready.
point.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And when you say that, Lana, it sort of it strikes me because you don't go into a relationship, whether you get married or not, whatever type, same sex or a male female relationship, whatever type of relationship you're in, you go in there with the thought that this is going to work.
Mm.
And then when things don't, I suppose you do take that, what am I pretending not to know? Well, I just don't want to look at it yet. It's all too hard. So that's a big moment when people come to that realization that, all right, I've seen it, I've kind of felt it on one sense, or I've buried it. But now coming to the surface, there is something more that I've got to do. I can't just continue on.
Yes, and definitely for a lot of people and women in particular, what follows that is, oh, I need to try harder. I need to do things differently. And so then there's often a period in there of trying to push and trying to change things. And I think that's helpful to some degree. We do need to take personal responsibility and it is helpful to bring things to light. But then there's also a point where you've got to be mindful that it won't necessarily get better if you just get good enough at doing all the things, right? So like you're a human being, you need to show up fully as yourself. And there's certainly certain things I would say to people in terms of how they communicate their needs and how to have conversations that are important to know and understand to make sure you've sort of given yourself and the relationship the best chance. But you can't keep kicking the can down the road saying, oh, if I just do this, oh, when this changes, oh, when that happens, it'll get better.
Mm.
If the pattern isn't, it hasn't been.
Yeah, there are repercussions, whatever you do, isn't there? Like to ignore it, there are repercussions. To do something, you've got repercussions. And like you often have
Yeah.
is choose your heart. What's it going to be? And there's so much to consider. And that's what we'll dive into, throughout our discussion today. It's not just you make it a snap decision and everything's going to be right. This is the way it's going to be. Although, Lana, we've got a couple of people that we know who have been in long-term relationships. They've worked all of this out in their heads themselves that this is how I'm feeling, this is what I'm going to do, and work through some of that early process, but don't tell their partner. So it comes as such a shock to the
Yeah.
partner then because they're unaware of the thoughts and the feelings that have
Yeah.
been happening. And perhaps they might know on some level and just chosen not to go there. But, have you found that in your work that sometimes one of the partners, one of the people in the relationship have been totally blindsided and going, well, where the hell has this come from?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's one of those reasons to make sure that you've done communication of your needs before you make that big decision. I'd say lack of communication is the major factor in relationships not
Yeah.
working or communication not going well. I don't know about 100% blindsided because I think you're correct when you say that we feel things and then you shove it back down, because we are all aware on this visceral level. When people say like, oh, you could cut the tension with a knife, everyone knows what that means, right? Like we know how things feel, but it's kind of like if we don't say it in words, we can pretend it doesn't exist. So I'd say that for most relationships, people would have a sense of it. And if they don't, it's because you're really good at covering it up, which is then
Yeah.
problematic in and of itself. Like, what
Yes,
are you
that's
doing that you are so good at
mm,
pretending and not actually showing up as yourself for sure? Yeah. So, yes, people will sometimes be blindsided. Generally, there's that sense, but I'd say most generally, we could do with a bit more communication before we get to that point.
yeah, and that's the hard part, isn't it? Because you know that it's filled with so many raw emotions and
Yeah.
you're hurt, your partner is going to be hurt, so tensions are high. So let's talk about that when you do know something's not right. And that's where a lot of people start with, and we're talking predominantly about women, well, we are talking about women here, but
Yeah.
that feeling that something's not right, you haven't got the words for it yet. So at what stage would somebody come to you just for that clarity? At what point would that person normally be?
Mm, yeah, knowing that they're unhappy, a lot of uncertainty as to what is normal, particularly if you're looking at a really long-term relationship. So, what is just being in a long-term relationship or being married like versus what can I actually expect or choose for myself? Yeah, not sure how bad things are, thinking about leaving, but like you said, like there's high consequences to either going or staying, usually, right? And so the real sense of being stuck. And we all would love this thing where it's like, I get to stay and the relationship is great. So, what do you do when you're making that hard choice between leave or stay, but it's not great? Because they both have these like long-term kind of consequences that play out for people.
Yeah, yeah. If what Lana and I are talking about today is resonating with you, if you've left a long term relationship or you're in the middle of leaving one, and you're wondering, who am I now and where do I even begin? I want to tell you about something that I've created with exactly that feeling in mind. It's called Rediscover You. It's a self paced toolkit designed for women who are ready to start a new chapter, but they just aren't quite sure what it's going to look like yet. Inside, you'll find a guided workbook that walks you through 9 key areas of your life, some deeper reflection prompts, a calming guided visualization, affirmation cards, and a monthly intention planner to help you move forward at your own pace, in your own time. It's not a course, it's not a program with deadlines or pressure. It's just a quiet, private space to come back to yourself. And it's just $47. You can find it at joeclarkcoaching.com/shop, and I'll also pop the link in the show notes. Now, back to Lana. You mentioned in our pre-chat that people often know what they don't want far more clearly than what they do want. And that really landed for me because that applies on with so many other different areas of life too.
Yes.
So why is it so important to work on that, to get clear on what you actually want rather than just staying in the I don't know what I want space?
Yeah, yeah. And that's highly psychological. So when you said it applies across lots of different areas, yes, it does.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because when we focus on what we don't want, you end up just creating more of the same. So our brain, and particularly our subconscious, doesn't process negatives particularly well. So whenever we're saying, I don't want, it's actually sort of just hearing that last part. So, I don't want silence. And what it kind of hears is
Mm.
silence, silence. What happens when we talk to ourselves in that way is that you start to then see more of that, and more of that problem appears in your life. You find all the silent times. And so that's hugely problematic. You just end up creating more of what you don't want.
Yeah.
And in terms of a relationship specifically and asking for change, if you're saying something to somebody like, I don't like it when you shut down, you're not actually telling them what would be helpful. And so again, that leaves them with nowhere to go. There's no direction into it. Whereas if you can say, when I say this, I want you to show me that you're listening by looking in my eyes, or I want to hear your opinion on what I'm saying, then that gives them a guideline as to this is the thing that you're actually after. So you're far more likely to get it.
Hmm.
And then vice versa, if we flip that, if we know that what we're looking for is open and deep communication, then you start seeing that. So if it's there in your partner, you'll actually see the times that they're capable of it, and you can express your appreciation for that, and that will encourage people to be more of themselves. You'll also see where else you do get open communication. It'll become clearer where there's colleagues at work who are really great at that, your friends that are really great at that. And then that can also spotlight in terms of your relationship. Geez, there's a big gap between, how some of the people in my life are supporting me and how I'm getting supported by my partner.
Gotcha. Yep. Makes sense. So when it comes to recognizing red flags in a relationship, then what are the ones that women most commonly minimize or might explain away? And then what would you say to a woman who keeps telling herself it's not that bad?
Yeah. I don't
Oh,
love
this could
that
be a
because I think
juicy one with that laugh. Okay, so
you can do better. That's what I always want to say
yeah.
to people. Yeah, that living a life that's not that bad. I think most people can do better than that for themselves, and that's a real disservice to ourselves. I think people often are not as supportive towards themselves as they would be to say like their children or to their best friend. And I think that's often a good lens to look at things through in terms of, what might be a red flag, what are we minimizing? Like we know the obvious ones around like physical abuse or people being emotionally abusive, people cheating. These are all like, well, that's a big red flag, right? But then there is a whole lot more subtle kind of red flags in terms of things that we would not accept for the people we love, but yet we find ourselves putting up with for ourselves. And so what that says to ourselves, if you're not prepared to actually support yourself and aim for the best. I'd say a real kind of aha moment for people who have children when we're talking about their relationship is to say, if your child ended up in a relationship like the one you're in now, is that okay by you? How do you feel about that? And just
That's
looking at it
powerful.
through, yeah, yeah. And what does that actually mean? Yeah.
And so, what are some of those red flags? Like we took, you gave some of the very obvious ones that should
Yeah.
be. What are some of the more subtle red flags that you see in the work that you do?
Um, People's needs just not being met, I think. And it's tricky because it becomes more it's much more personal in terms of, well, what is good enough for me? What am I prepared to accept in my relationship, in my life, and what am I not? In all my work with people, something I find fascinating is people who have really high standards will get those standards met, and people who have low standards just let in lots, and so you
Yeah.
get what you expect is
Yes.
something that happens. So then it's like having a look at like, what am I actually expecting for myself? But yeah, I'd say in general, a red flag is if I ask for things that I need and then my partner is not supportive of that. I'd say one of our major goals in our lives is to get our needs met. And sometimes we're not meeting our own needs because of what that might do within the relationship. Like, I don't want to go out and do an art class I'm really interested in because I think my partner will be mad that I'm not at home or think that I'm cheating or something horrible like that, you know?
Yeah.
And so if you're not getting your needs met, if you're not pushing to go to that art class, then that's a red flag. But it's subtle, right? Because you might think about it and then think, oh, they wouldn't like it, or it's a bit hard. And so then again, you just kind of suppress that down. But if you're looking at what do I actually need, what excites and interests me in life, and then is my partner supporting that, or are they actually blocking that and taking away from that?
Yeah.
I think in general, partnership should be a net positive, right? Like, what I'm getting back from it is worth the costs of it. And so in
Mm.
general, like if you're looking at that and it's actually costing you more than what I'm getting back, then that's a red flag as well. Yeah.
Yes.
Particularly, like in terms of things like energy, a lot of women get really burnt out because they're giving so much of the mental load, so much of the chores, a lot of the caretaking, and they're working. And so they're giving all that out, and then they're not necessarily getting, the love and support and appreciation back. And it's out of balance that way.
Yeah. And it's, I suppose, this midlife era that we're in, like the midlife stage is between, they roughly say, sociologists say between 40 and 65. That's a lot of life in there. So you've got those busy years, if you do have children, of all of that with your career, with mortgages, with, there's that high stress time as well, where there's not much time for yourself, let alone for you and your partner to have a relationship. And then you
Mm.
slowly, over the years, that morphs and change, and maybe your career is established. Maybe you want some moves and changes there. Maybe you start into a different caretaking role with your, aging parents,
Yeah.
children leaving home. So there's a whole lot of other things that I think for women in midlife, there's so many changes in their own identity. And then how does that morph and change into the identity that you have with your partner? How does that look? So there's got to be, like, do you see a give and take needed during that time, or an understanding? Like, you've got to understand yourself, obviously, and we'll talk about that soon, looking at our own patterns. But
Yeah.
is that something that you see? Is there a time that is being a more likely for a woman to decide to leave? Is it when their children are younger, when they're older? Probably haven't framed the question right, but I'm just thinking on my head because it's such a busy time
Yeah.
for women, and the stresses and pressures on a relationship as well as you go through these different stages.
Yeah, and you're right. It depends on what specific pressures and stressors people have. So some people are just literally too focused on other things, and so the relationship doesn't get much attention. And some relationships can survive that and some can't. If there's a bit more time and space available, midlife is a point for both men and women, and this is where that whole midlife crisis thing kind of comes about, where people have often ticked a lot of the boxes. They've got married, they've had kids, they've bought the house, their career is established. And so then there's a check-in as to this is great, this is what I wanted, or oh, I ticked all those external boxes, yet somehow I'm still unhappy within myself. And so that often then starts this process. And, women are in this very particular position in history now where we have a lot more financial independence than we did before. And so that traditional, like, going back, yeah, more than sort of 50 years, traditional idea of marriage where they needed that financial support from the partner, it's just not there in the same way. And so they're looking at, well, what am I getting out of this? If I'm already independent and I'm working and I've got my friends and I've got my kids, what's my partner doing? What is their role? What do I need from them? And are they giving that to
Yeah.
me?
And I guess also as a woman gets older and her circumstances change as far as her requirements and the needs to meet for other people, they've got a little bit more time and space to really learn more about themselves and who they are now and what the relationship is like. And I suppose you might go, I don't know if I really want to be with that person anymore. Maybe you're not growing at the same rate. Maybe you just suddenly wake up one morning and you go, yeah, no, I can't see myself with you for another 30, 40 years. So that's
Yes. Yeah. And I think that's where that busyness creeps in. So the most common divorce time now is post 50, and it's
Mm.
when the kids have grown up. So it's like, go into a relationship, you're happy, you have the children, life gets busy. A lot of times the relationship is neglected. Everything else seems to get attention other than that. But people change. People often are changing. So sometimes it's only one partner and sometimes it's both of them. But if we're both changing, then yeah, you're right. Like there might be a point where it's like, oh, but we just want different things, or we are different people. You just evolve in different ways. And so then what do we do with that?
Mm.
Is that something I can appreciate in the other person? And we can redefine, what this relationship is bringing to each of us? Or is it like, yeah, we're just no longer a good fit. We're just not meeting the needs of the current person that I am now, even if you were great at meeting different needs of mine, 20 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about now then. All right, a woman has decided to leave. One thing that comes up for a lot of women, and probably women who are in the younger stages of midlife, is what happens to the children? There's a real
Hmm.
tension between staying for the kids and
Yeah.
evidence that children are affected by growing up in a home where the relationship is unhappy. So just think about what's your perspective on that? Do we stay and be unhappy and model that, or do we show a different version? And you've got lived
Yeah.
experience of this as well.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that was one of the things that really stood out for me was what kind of relationship am I modeling? To my daughter, particularly, was the thing that really mattered to me in terms of this is what an adult romantic relationship looks like. And, that question of like, would I be happy if she was behaving this way with a man like that? And I was like, no, no, I wouldn't be,
Yeah.
because yeah, I think this idea of like, staying for the kids is built around the idea that the very best thing for the children is to have both parents, physically present all the time. But like we talked about before, if there's unspoken tension, kids pick up on that and they pick up on it way more than adults. The brain isn't fully developed until between 21 and 25. So up until that point, anyone who has kids knows this, right? They're way more emotional and they watch things. They're not processing things intellectually in the same way. So even if you're not actively fighting, if there's tension, there's walking on eggshells, there's a lot of physical distance between the two of you, one person sort of reaching out, the other person rebuffing, they're watching all that. And so they're picking up on those messages so much more strongly than any intellectual idea of both of these people are in my house at the same
Mm.
time.
Mm.
So yeah, I don't think it's always the best thing for the kids at all. We need to think about, am I modeling being the person that I'd like my kids to grow into being? And if you are walking around silencing yourself, making yourself small, just staying in a situation for somebody else, which is essentially putting other people's needs before yours, you want your kids to grow up like that?
Yeah.
No.
I think women are in a different, like, for, I grew up watching that as a child, what you were just explaining then.
Yeah.
That was my lived reality. I saw that.
Yep.
And I think women now, they've got that, it's easier for women to make the choice to leave,
Mm.
having a bit more financial. Not everyone is going to be in that state. This is a general statement. So apologies to anyone who's listening going, yeah, well, that's not my story. But there's more opportunity for a woman to earn money, to have that financial independence, to have the support, the networks,
Yeah.
than perhaps of my mother's era, definitely. And I know staying for the kids, as a child watching an unhappy marriage, all I wanted was, for it to end so
Yeah.
that both people were happier, because
Yes.
it's really not healthy. And
Yeah.
I just, thank God that I've had a relationship where, and I think I've always had that. That's not going to be my story. That's not going to be for me. And so if it was ever going to happen, I'm out of there, sort of thing. Like I was very hyper aware then. So yeah, I just, yeah, found that really interesting. You talking about that, and I've also seen, in my role as a teacher, children who come from homes where there's a lot of friction and what that does to them. So yeah, it does impact children. They watch,
Yeah.
they know what's
Yeah.
going on.
Definitely.
Yeah. So we talked about the emotional side of the decision, but there's also that practical reality, and we sort of touched on a little bit then, particularly around money. So it can be genuinely frightening, especially for women who might have been out of the workforce, or they might have just less financial independence and have that ability to have an income, a larger income, to be independent. So how do you help women think about that, and how do you actually plan for that piece?
Yeah. So I would say the key thing that you're thinking about is the word support, because that helps you understand there's lots of different ways that things can happen, right? So yeah, financial support is a big piece of the picture. Does my income actually cover the basic expenses that I'd need to live? I would generally recommend to people that they go and see a family lawyer. So one of the things that they will do with you first is just give you a bit of a sense as to, okay, this is realistically what you're looking at financially, so that you get that picture. And it will also clear up, because you need information for that person around, like, what are the assets that the family has? What are the debts and liabilities? If you don't know that kind of thing, then you'll find out that you don't know that kind of thing. And so there might be some information gathering around there as well. But I think for better or worse, knowing, getting that certainty from someone who's a professional and could say, like, look, this is what you're likely to get, as some kind of lump sum payment or as an ongoing payment, and then what's your income like, that gives you a sense of, like, okay, this is possible, or if it's not possible. If it's
Right.
not possible, like you said, if people aren't working, okay, well, what would I need to do? So getting specific, not getting defeated at that point, by the way, but understanding, all right, well, what do I need to do next then? Like, what's the gap? How could I close that gap for myself? Is it possible to close that gap, even if it takes me like a few years to, work my way up in my workplace or get an extra qualification? Taking that kind of action for yourself is motivating, gives you something else to focus on, while a lot of women are prepping one way or another for years before they're actually making that decision. So that, yeah, the financial aspect matters, but I would say support in general as well. So if it isn't financially viable for me to actually leave the relationship, then where is my support? Do I have a friend where I can just go and stay in their spare bedroom a couple of nights a week just to get some time for myself and breathing room? Like, who do I know that I can talk to about this for that emotional support? Or yeah, getting professional support in there to help you make some of these decisions. But yes, the absolute worst thing is, like, to just sit by yourself alone thinking, I don't know how to figure this out, and not taking any action. So at least
Yeah.
talking to people is the bridge between, I have no idea what to do and I'm just here, and then actually being able to take some of those steps forward. And there's lots of things, like, there's people, like, there's Facebook groups for all this stuff, right? So you can join groups like that to look at what other people's experiences are, where are their sticking points, what resources are out there.
And every relationship is unique anyway. Every person is unique.
Mm.
So everyone will be coming to you at different stages. When do you think, again, from your personal work that you've done, and your own perspective, is the best time to get that support? Is it early on? Is it during those really messy talking it out with lawyers and going through that? Or is it after? Or is it everything? Like, is it all the way through? Like, what do you see as sort of some key times?
Look, I'm such a big fan of prevention over cure. And, like, as I said, I'm interested in physical as well as mental health. It's better to do the exercise and take the vitamins, instead of waiting until you get sick and then trying to, like, solve it at that point. It tends to be more expensive and less effective. So I would say to people, get support early, right? Something that's pretty important to me is that if people are going to leave, that they know that they've done everything they could to the best of their ability, because it will just cancel any possibility of regret. So having professional support helps, because they can be like, okay, well, have you done this? Have you tried that? And you can go away and do those, essentially communication about, do you know what your needs are? How are you meeting them? Okay, can we take these to your partner about what you need from the partnership? How are they responding? If you're doing all that, and you're still unhappy, you basically know it's not going to get better. in that situation. So I think that's helpful. I'd say in my work with people, particularly, we're looking at what are those patterns from your own childhood a lot of the time that might be blocking you. So people will often have patterns from childhood around where they needed things or wanted things and they couldn't have them. And so they get these ideas like, my needs will never be met, or other people's needs are more important than mine. And so if you've got those kind of beliefs running, you won't be able to prioritize yourself. You'll know it intellectually, but you'll just get stuck. And so working through those sorts of beliefs might need to happen before you can even have the conversations and take
Right.
the action.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk about more of that on that work on yourself then, because there's a great
Mm.
saying, wherever you go, there you are. And you touched on this
True.
during our pre-chat conversation, and that whole idea, and you brought that up then, that if we leave a relationship without doing our own inner work, we risk creating or recreating those same dynamics and patterns with somebody new. So can you talk to me about that a little bit more?
Yeah, yeah. So essentially, whatever you believe about the world is what you end up creating over and over again. And so, yes, if you know that your needs aren't being met in this relationship, and you have that essential relationship with yourself and that belief that I can't get my needs met or other people's are always more important, we are actually capable of doing things in a reactionary way and pushing back and getting a different result for a period of time. So you might get angry enough or hurt enough that you're like, I'm done, I'm leaving. But if that belief is still there, then you will. You just end up in another relationship where your needs are not going to be prioritized. And a lot of this is not working at a conscious level. It has to do with what feels safe for us rather than what's actually literally best for us. So people tend to end up attracted to and staying with people that can't meet their needs if that's what's usual for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah.
And
Makes
so yes, if you don't work on it, you
yeah.
just get more of the same. And then you've gone through all that expense and hassle just to do more of the same. So
Yes.
definitely we want to look
Yeah.
at, yeah, our responsibility, our contribution.
And that's right. Well, I see the purpose of being alive is just to constantly reiterate, improve, and be the best version of yourself you can going forward. And if I think if every woman felt that for herself, then getting that and doing some of that harder work would definitely be very beneficial for her. So thinking about you then, you built a deeper relationship with yourself after your own divorce, and you went on to create a more satisfying partnership with someone new. What do you think you had to genuinely work through or let go of to be ready for that?
Yeah. So when I reflected on my relationship with my husband, the key thing that I saw that I was responsible for was I was not great at speaking up for my needs, and particularly, I guess, pushing on that, in to the point where I actually got what I wanted. So, and I see this a lot in other people as well. So I will ask once, and then if it doesn't happen, it's like, oh, well, it's too hard. I give up. I don't want to keep going with it. So I
Mm.
knew for myself that speaking up, and I suppose, yeah, like the belief around it would be like, yeah, if I speak up for myself, I stand up for myself, I get in trouble. That's coming out of my childhood and how I was parented, right?
Yeah.
And towards the ends of the relationship, I did do my best to speak up more. And I didn't get what I wanted. And I also, so it's like twofold. It's like I did a better job of it. And I also came and gets these points where I was like, oh, I'm getting stuck. I'm literally freezing and I cannot speak up in this environment. And so I understood that I was, it was a limit for me, I think, is what I'm trying to say. Like, I couldn't just speak up for myself all the time because the reaction I was getting from my husband was just causing me to shut down. It was too aggressive, too push back, and I wasn't coping with it.
Mm.
And so that also was informing my decision to leave. It's like, okay, if you really can't speak up for yourself 100% in that environment, you are just going to have to get out of that environment. It's not working for you. You've done the best you could, and it's just not enough, right? Like, so to kind of take care of myself, get out of that. And then I found that being single and having friends that responded to me in a very beautiful way. So throughout that process, I got better at sharing with my friends who I was, how things were for me. And I just got a lot of positive reinforcement for that, People were really receptive, really supportive, really encouraging, which helped. And that's also sort of work that you can do with a therapist or a coach as well. These people are 100% on your side and want the best for you. And so then when I got into a new relationship, I went in with the headspace that the most important thing I can do is be myself, that I just want to change the pattern, right? So either the pattern changes or the relationship would fall apart, but that was the goal more than, having to make a relationship work, I suppose. It was much more like, okay, I need to show up as me and see what happens. And it went well, right? So then it was like that piece that I couldn't get in the marriage where I wasn't able to fully express myself. When I expressed myself, I was getting a response that I wanted. And so that was fine. And that's what's made it more satisfying, that I can be fully myself and it's okay.
Gotcha. And did you feel more empowered then going into a new relationship with all of these, the new insight, the different skills, the ability to see yourself in a different way and communicate in a different way?
Somewhat, yes. And it was also somewhat scary in terms of
Yeah,
like, will
no, I'm
I
sure it would
actually be
be.
able to do this or am I going
Yeah.
to fall back into old patterns? And I'd say it's been pretty challenging for me, that there's a pretty loud voice in your head that, or in my head, that is like, oh, but this could be bad, but oh, like it will really
Mm.
catastrophize the way that things go. And so then it's like this continual process of like reminding myself, support yourself, like if it goes that way, it's just not the right relationship for you. And then, yeah, take the risk, take the risk, take the risk. And it's always been fine. It's always been fine. So, yeah. And then the more of it you do, the more it's like, it's okay.
Yes.
But I think there's something in there as well about really supporting yourself, like being prepared to ask for what you need and to do what needs to happen to take care of your needs and caring about you more than you're caring about a particular relationship or
Mm.
person.
Yeah. And you can imagine too, we'll talk about that rebuilding and moving forward then as well. So, if you think about much of who we are is wrapped up in a relationship with another person, isn't it? Especially if it's
Mm.
been as adults, with most people have had a significant other there. So for a woman who's just left a long-term relationship, always having another person there, what does that identity piece look like and feel like when you're suddenly not in a couple, but you're a single person again? But that's a lot to deal with as well, I imagine, emotionally and mentally.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's where understanding what your needs are helps a lot. Am I a social person that has a high need for connection? So I am going to really work hard on that. If you're someone that needs other people in your space, then is living alone the best choice for you? But a lot of women, when they leave, are feeling like they've been giving away so much, so many of their needs haven't been met, that if they can take that energy back and then have their own needs met, they're not anywhere near as focused on a partner as you would think. So most women, once they're divorcing in midlife,
Yeah.
they're not going back into living with people or marriage relationships. They are just so focused on like, oh, I can just do what I want and it's
Whenever
easy
I
and it's
want.
less
Yeah, yeah.
work. Yeah, yeah, yeah. But I think it's important to understand yourself. Plenty of women that I know, both personally and professionally, are like, I get out and they're just done. They just do not want to go back in. They're like, I've done that experience. I'm fine to be by myself. I knew for myself that, yeah, I like being in a relationship. So for me, I expected that I would go and look for a relationship at the right time, because I knew that it mattered to who I was as a person. So yeah, I guess it's another element of understanding your identity. Is that something that works for you, or was it an experience that you went through, but you don't need to keep it
Yeah.
around life? Yeah.
Yeah. And for those who are looking to go back into the whole dating scene again, and that can be, for me, I would feel daunted by it because
Yeah.
I'd hate to know what it's like. So kudos to women who do this. What does healthy dating look like when you're in midlife, and particularly for a woman who might be still healing from having left a long-term relationship, still finding her feet? but also doesn't want to be alone forever. So how do you dip your toes in?
Yeah, there's a few different ways. I do think you need to think that you're healed to a certain point, right? Because dating is intense. It very quickly amplifies things. And so if, if a connection with someone is going well, people can feel really good. But then if that doesn't end well, then you end up feeling really bad. So you've got to be careful. Like, have I healed enough from my past relationship that I kind of relatively emotionally stable that I can kind of weather those extra extremes of emotion? And people are just so different with that. A lot of times, women have grieved the end of the relationship while they're still in the relationship, and those types of people won't need a huge gap before they start dating. If it was more quick, or if you're not the one initiating the separation, you probably need a lot more time to work through it. But once you're at the point where you think you're ready, there's meeting people through your regular life, through deliberate sort of meetup type groups or dating connection groups, and then you've got the apps. I think the apps are the most intense. I don't have a lot of
Daunting part, yeah.
about those. Yeah, I mean, people like it because it's easy,
Yeah.
but like lots of things in life, the easiest choice isn't necessarily the one that's going to be best for us. But essentially, it's still about knowing yourself, right? If you know who you are, you like yourself enough that you know what you have to offer, then approach dating as though it's curiosity, right? Who is this
Mm.
other person standing in front of me, right? Who are they? What are they like in their life? And this is who I am. And then, yeah, do I want to build a connection from that? It's something that works a lot better in person,
Yeah.
getting that sense for all those reasons we talked about before, that there's a lot of information we get about relationships that has nothing to do with our little intellectual words about them, and much more about, yeah, what it's like being with that person. But yeah, you show up as yourself, right? So understanding that I'm good enough as I am. And so some people will recognize that and other people won't. The people that don't recognize it, well, they're just not your people, right? And that,
Mm.
yeah, there will be people out there that
Yeah.
recognize that in you.
Yeah. So you coach women on removing those blocks and the patterns that get in the way of relationship success. So what are the most common ones that you see in women in this stage of life?
Um,
Have we already talked about that, or is there something that we haven't quite nailed?
oh no, I think we generally have, right? So women are in general taught to be peacemakers. A lot of times people put other people's needs before their own. So women can be quite good at meeting their needs if it doesn't impact anybody else. But as soon as they need to take away from somebody else, or somebody else might get upset by that, there's often a
Mm.
real struggle there. And yeah, they won't be new things that show up in midlife. It's like consistent patterns that we've
Yeah.
held.
Okay.
And maybe you're only becoming aware of them in midlife, but it tends to be way longer standing stuff than that. Like in general, what's accepted is that most of the beliefs we hold about the world are developed before we're seven. It's a long
Yeah, it
time
is a long
before
time, isn't it?
midlife. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Then, Lana, before we wrap up, and I've got a couple of questions just to wrap up,
Hmm.
is there anything that you think, like any parting wisdom that you would have or you would like to give to women before or while they're in the process of perhaps thinking about leaving, or they've done that, they've left? What part of all of our discussion today would you like women to be left with?
I think it's know what your needs are, do what you can. Yeah, and then no, that's just the other part of it, is and just do what you can to get those needs met. It probably is actually that simple. Know what you need, because often we know what we don't. We need to know what you're working towards, and then go after it, whether that's staying in the relationship or leaving it. If you have to clear out blocks in yourself to be able to get your needs met, if you have to be able to make some more money to get your needs met, take more time for you, whatever it is.
Mm.
Yeah, but I think, yeah, you can pretty much sum it up within that, right? Know what you need, take away the blocks to what you need, go after it.
Yeah, which sounds simple, but that's a lot of inner work, isn't it? And a lot of work perhaps with somebody like yourself to help you through.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So the catchphrase I come back to quite regularly is simple but not easy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. So where can people find you and, follow your work or learn more about what you do, or suggestions of if they can't work with you one to one, where can they look for someone like you?
Yeah. So I mean, I'm probably most active on Instagram, so that's where you can kind of see little bits and pieces that I do and wisdom that I'm sharing there.
Yep. So
Um,
what's your handle for
yeah,
people?
yeah, I was just trying to remember. I'm like, wait, you should tell people what that is. Lana Hall Life Coach is what
Okay. And I'll
it
have the
is.
links in the show notes as well.
Yes, put the
Yep.
note. Yes, definitely do that because I wouldn't be quite clear on the pattern of the underscores within all that.
Wonderful.
Um, yeah, and then Lana Hall Coaching is my website, which gives you a little bit more of an idea about like the type of packages that I offer for people who want to work one-on-one. And I've got a little freebie about how you get yourself to that point of getting your needs met. Like, what does it mean to sit with that? How do you bring it up with other people when you're ready to do that? So that's a, super easy way
Yeah,
to
that can be a
close in the
useful,
water.
useful
Yeah,
document for
and connects
somebody.
into what I've just said is the most important thing. So
Beautiful. Well, that aligned very nicely then. So,
cheers.
Lana, as we wrap up now, as you're going through your own midlife, what are you most enjoying or most grateful for this chapter?
Oh, I think it really is. I am just coming into deeper and deeper levels of supporting myself. I think that, in the past I have put other people's needs first or ignored my own, and I'm just really enjoying the space to be more fully myself and seeing that work well. And yeah, that process of getting to know who am I now and how do I support that woman? What else can I
Mm.
give myself in terms of support to be more of that and to enjoy more of those things in life that I love.
No,
Yeah.
I love hearing that. Yeah,
Yeah,
good.
it's great. It's
And then
fun.
finally, what do you hope 80-year-old Lana will say about the work current day Lana is doing in the world?
Oh, that's an interesting question. I just hope she would be really proud of me, that she is like, yes, you did do the best to support yourself. You tried as hard as you could. You did all the things that you could. You gave it your best shot, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Effort over results. We can't guarantee what we'll get, but like, yeah, how did you show up? So
Fantastic. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And ladies, if you want to get in touch with Lana, all of those details will be in the show notes. But yeah, love to anyone who's going through a difficult relationship time or a time where you're contemplating leaving or have just left. But as Lana said, and she's proof that there is life on the other side once you move on.
definitely. Thank you,
Yeah.
Joe.
Thank you so much, Lana.
Cheers.
Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate, follow, and share it with another incredible midlife woman. And join me next week as we keep creating an amazing second half of life.